Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. In today's video, we're doing another set of positional rankings. So I've already gone through the top 12 running backs, top 12 wide receivers. Today's video is going to be all about the quarterbacks. And I feel like once again, heading into the 2022 season, the quarterback position for fantasy football is very, very strong. In years previous, if you didn't get one of those like top 8 guys, you were probably going to be on the outside looking in of quarterback production. But this year, I feel like there are at least 12 players that I'd feel very, very confident having as my QB1. And then there's probably even going to be, one or two guys that aren't going to make these top 12 that people probably think should be in here. So that really just speaks to the depth that we have at the position. And let's jump right into it. Starting off here at number 1, this is where I have Josh Allen. And in my opinion, he is the clear-cut number 1 quarterback. He finished as the QB2 in points per game in 2020. And then followed that up by finishing as the QB1 last season. He's fantastic as a passer. We all know that. But what I really liked was the elite rushing upside that he showed last year. He rushed for 763 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. And this is going to be a common trend for a lot of the high-end QB1s. Because a lot of quarterbacks can average like 21 points per game as a pocket passer, but they just don't have that elite ceiling that a guy like Josh Allen could have, or some of the players I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. But now here at number 2, this is where I have Justin Herbert. And he definitely doesn't have the same rushing upside as some of the quarterbacks around him, but he's definitely not a zero in that department. If he plays a full season, he's probably going to be in that like 300 rushing yard, 4 or 5 touchdown range. But as a passer, he has been sensational. Averaged 22.2 points per game as a rookie, and then followed it up by averaging 22.4 points per game in his second season. This offense is going to look very similar to how it did in 2021, so I really just don't see why he's not going to be finishing as a high-end QB1 once again. And I think I talked about this with Austin Eckler, but their head coach, Brandon Staley, is very, very aggressive on fourth downs, which is only going to benefit those offensive weapons, because when they're on the goal line, 4th and 1, they are going to be going for it a decent amount, which is just going to give Justin Herbert an opportunity to score more fantasy points. Now here at number 3, this is where I have Lamar Jackson, and I could totally see an argument for him at number 2. If he was your number 2, I would not be saying that's a bad call, because he does have the highest ceiling of any quarterback. Even though he hasn't been a high-end QB1 the past 2 seasons, he still had a decent floor, averaging 20 plus points per game both of those years. We've seen him make improvements in the passing game over the past few seasons, but he has still maintained that elite rushing upside. And if he does play a full 17-game season, he basically seems like a lock to rush for 1,000 yards, which is just wild at the quarterback position. So I'm definitely willing to take a shot on Lamar Jackson, who may not have, the safest floor, but has shown that he can average 27.7 points per game. That's what he did in his MVP season. Do I think he's going to average that number ever again? Probably not, because that is absurd. But it's not crazy to think that, in a really good year, he could average 25 points per game, which is just something that's not going to happen for a lot of these pocket passers that don't have that rushing ability. Moving on to number 4, this is where I have Kyler. He's finished as actually the QB4 in points per game in back-to-back seasons. He has that rushing upside that I'm looking for with these high-end QB1s. Right now, his supporting cast doesn't look great. Heading into 2022, he lost Christian Kirk. We don't know what's going on with AJ Green, but he's going to have DeAndre Hopkins as his wide receiver 1. Rondale Moore is going to be in the mix. I'd expect them to draft a wide receiver early. This is a solid wide receiver class. Or maybe they go after one of these remaining free agents, bring in a guy like Jarvis Landry, a Julio Jones. Who knows, but I definitely don't think that wide receiver room is, wrapped up, ready to go for 2022. And now here's where we kind of shift off of those mobile quarterbacks, with number 5 being Tom Brady. And I honestly expect TB12 to be undervalued once again heading into this season. He doesn't provide much on the ground aside from a few touchdowns a season, which is why I don't think he has much room to move up. Like, I don't see him jumping Kyler or Lamar in these rankings. But you just know exactly what you're getting out of Tom Brady. He's going to finish in that 22 point per game range. This is a pass-heavy offense. We've seen it for 2 straight years. He took a solid jump from his 2020 season to 2021. He's once again going to have top-tier pass catchers, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. They brought in Russell Gage. Hopefully they bring back Gronk. If they do not retain Gronk, maybe he moves down a spot or two. But I mean, then they're just going to run a ton of 3 wide receiver sets, and then you're going to have those stud pass catchers out there anyway. So I really like Brady as a mid-tier QB1. At number 6, this is where I have Patrick Mahomes, and his value definitely took a little bit of a hit with Tyreek Hill being traded to the Dolphins. I still think he's going to be a really solid quarterback. We know, in real NFL, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but without top-tier rushing ability, and now he's lacking, at the wide receiver position. You've got Juju, but he's proven he can't really operate as the wide receiver 1. I just don't know if Patrick Mahomes has the same ceiling that we've seen in years past, where he's been able to average like 24 plus points per game. Maybe they make a big move, make a splash in the draft, then I'll reevaluate. But right now, he's going to come in here at number 6. And on to number 7, this is where I have Joe Burrow. He put together a great season after tearing his ACL in 2020, finished as the QB 10 in points per game. But this offense is only going to be getting better. Burrow's going into his 3rd year. He should be improving. T. Higgins going into year 3. Jamar Chase going into year 2. And then they've gone out in free agency, addressed the offensive line, brought in Kappa and Collins. Those are major, major improvements. And so I think in 2022, he should be a very reliable mid-tier QB1 option. Another pocket passer here at number 8. This is where I have Matthew Stafford. He was the QB 11 in points per game in his first season with the Rams. And I'm expecting Stafford to take a solid jump from year 1 with the Rams to year 2. Just like we saw with Tom Brady in 2020 to 2021, it's tough to come into a brand new offense, brand new terminology, brand new coaches when you've been with one team your entire career. That is what Stafford did. That is what Brady did. They were both very successful in their first seasons. So I do think Stafford's going to improve. He's once again going to have solid weapons, Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, and then he has a top offensive-minded head coach in Sean McVay. So a lot of things to like there with Matthew Stafford. Now moving on to number 9, this is where I have Trey Lance, and I think he's a very, very interesting fantasy option. Right now, it seems like it's almost a certainty that he is going to be the week 1 starter. At some point, I expect Jimmy Garoppolo to be moved. Seems like talks have kind of slowed down. A lot of other quarterbacks have switched teams, but I think at some point, a team is going to acquire Jimmy Garoppolo. And looking at Trey Lance, I feel like he's in a very similar situation to what I thought about Jalen Hurts last offseason. With Hurts last year, I was basically saying that he could be the QB1 at the end of the year, or he may not even be a starting quarterback. That's, how wide his range of outcomes were. I do think Trey Lance, very likely is going to be the starter the entire year because they did spend very high draft capital on him. They're not going to give up, on him in less than a full season. He does possess that elite rushing upside, which could lead him to be a high-end QB1, but we just haven't seen much of him as a player yet. He only started 2 games last year, couldn't really overtake Jimmy G as the QB1, despite Jimmy Garoppolo not really playing at a very high level. I do think it's very possible that Trey Lance gets picked ahead of the QB9 spot where I have him at right now, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see how his ADP kind of progresses throughout the offseason. Now at number 10, this is where I have Russell Wilson, new team for us in 2022. I kind of feel like the hype of him being traded to the Broncos may push his ADP up, but I feel like here at number 10 is a fair spot for him. This Broncos offense is a good one. They've got capable weapons, Sutton, Judy, Patrick. You got Javonte Williams there. But for fantasy, this kind of seems like a lateral move in terms of his situation. Like, this is a good situation here with the Broncos, but with the Seahawks, he had DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. It's not like he was lacking weapons there. And in Wilson's 10 seasons, we've seen him sit between 16.9 points per game and 22.5 points per game. So just very, very consistent on a year-to-year basis. But he really has never showed that elite ceiling. And he's really, not as prone to using his legs as he was earlier in his career. So I feel like he's going to end up in that 19.5 to 22 point per game range, which is really, really solid, as a back-end QB1 option. Here at number 11, I have Jalen Hurts. And honestly, reading this, I feel like it seems low for Hurts, but right now the quarterback position is just so stacked. As a fantasy asset, Hurts was very, very solid last year. The QB6 in points per game, averaged 20.8 points per game, and Hurts was really able to make up for his subpar passing numbers with 784 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. The thing is, the Eagles still haven't made a ton of moves to improve the offense around him. Maybe they do so in the draft, but it still just doesn't seem like the Eagles are totally 100% committed to Hurts. I know they said he'd be the quarterback in 2022, but now there are rumors that they're kind of want to save their draft picks, if Hurts does bust in 2023. So we'll just see if he's able to improve that offense around him, which would definitely help support him for fantasy football. And now the final player in these top 12 rankings is going to be Dak Prescott. He had a very solid 2021 season, finished as the quarterback 8 in points per game. And number 12 may seem harsh, but I kind of feel like he's in a spot where he finished, around guys like Joe Burrow and Matthew Stafford last year. But for Burrow and Stafford, I'm seeing these avenues for really solid improvement, on their rosters. But we're looking at Dak Prescott, who's lost Amari Cooper. The Cowboys haven't made really any upgrades on the offensive end. So right now he's going to be sitting as a back-end QB1. Didn't really show a ton of upside with his legs last year. Could be, because he was coming off of that season-ending injury. But right now this is where he is going to slot in. And then I want to talk about two players who are honorable mentions, and that is going to be Deshaun Watson first. And I just didn't put him on this list because I think it's very likely he does receive a suspension. Even though he wasn't convicted of any crimes, they're still, giving out suspensions to players. But if he's not suspended, I think he definitely slots in as a mid-tier quarterback one. This is a very solid situation with the Browns, and he'd probably be in that Brady, Mahomes range, QB5, QB6 in there. Because, we saw what he did on the Texans with nothing around him. He's now going to have Amari Cooper there. The offense as a whole is very competent. So just not on the list right now because I do think he gets suspended. But that's just a situation we're kind of going to have to wait out. And then a player that I think a lot of people thought would make the top 12, Aaron Rodgers. And I totally understand that. It's probably pretty shocking to see the back-to-back MVP not in the top 12. But we just got to look at this Green Bay Packers roster. He has 0 weapons right now. All these other pocket passers that made the top 12, Brady, Burrow, Stafford, they all have stacked weapons. Brady's got Evans, Godwin, Burrow has Higgins, Chase, Stafford, I mentioned it, Kupp, Allen Robinson. Rodgers literally has no one right now. So, until or unless they make some improvements, he will be on the outside looking in of my top 12 quarterbacks. That is going to wrap it up for this one. Let me know what you guys think about the rankings. Who do you think should be higher or lower? Do you think Rodgers or Watson should make the cut? Let me know down below in the comment section. I'll make sure to respond to every single person. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next one.